Hi there, and welcome to Your Voice Dorset Podcast. On today's episode, we have Simon Hoare. He's the Conservative MP for the seat of North Dorset. In today's episode, we talk about all the issues facing his constituency, we talk about the US-American presidency, and we talk about the situation in the Middle East. It's a wide-ranging and very political episode, but I hope you enjoy listening. So thank you very much for joining us, Simon. Do you want to talk about how you got into politics? You were first elected in 2015, weren't you?
I sort of fell into it, and I still don't know if it's the best question I ever asked or the worst. I don't know. So you've got to go back to the mid-1980s. I'm a slightly sort of geeky, interested in politics mid-teenager, and got off the school bus, saw this guy walking down the road who I thought was our Member of Parliament, went up and said, "Excuse me, I think you are a Member of Parliament." And he said, "Yes." And this is the question I'm not entirely sure whether it was the best question I ever asked or the worst. I said, "Is there anything I can do to help?" And he went, "Oh, yeah, great. I'm delivering these surveys. Can you help me?" So we wandered down the street delivering them and chatted away. And then by the end of the road, and you've got to now conjure up the picture, because this is a rather strange visual scene of a Tory MP and a teenage boy. He leans over and I'm filling out my membership form on his back. And I'd found a couple of quid in my pocket and sort of handed that over. And the rest, as they say, is history. I thought it was engaging. It was fascinating that you met interesting people in their own space, in their businesses, in their organisations, on their doorstep. And the power of politics to make substantial change, but substantial change doesn't have to be world-shattering change. It can be substantial to the individual just by helping to solve a problem which they have not been able to find a solution to. And by nature, very, very nosy. And of course, being a politician allows you to ask all sorts of people, all sorts of questions, and very kindly they feel that they're under some obligation to answer. And I think it is a vocation. It's not a job. It is a sort of calling in a way. And I know some people who loathe politicians will just go, no, it's nothing of the sort. But I'm afraid I still see it as a vocation. And there's, 650 of us in the House of Commons, all from different backgrounds and different outlooks, different parties, obviously, different parts of the country. But we're all trying to do our best in our own way to make our little patch of the United Kingdom, which we're lucky enough to represent in the Commons, a better place as a result of our public service. And, there's something rather, I was going to say noble about that, but that sounds a slightly old-fashioned word to use. I still think there's something noble about the doing of politics.
Absolutely. I feel like people are quick to dismiss sometimes, but every politician in the House of Parliament has got good intentions. They are trying to do the right thing.
Look, I've been an MP for 10 years. I was a district and county councillor for 14 years prior to that, and a parish councillor for 3 prior to that. I've yet to find anybody of any party who's ever said, "Do you know why I stood for election? It's to make people poorer, or to make people less well educated, or to make people not as healthy as they are or could be, or to make the economy worse." Everybody goes in with the best of intentions. Now, look, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and we get things wrong. Of course we do, because we're not plaster-footed saints. But it's not for want of trying to get it right from the best motivations.
Absolutely. So the last 10 years you've represented North Dorset, and possibly a sore point, but obviously there's been a transition over that time from government to opposition. How are you finding that change?
Not as dramatic as you might think. And it's a question that we get asked a lot, as you can imagine, particularly on such a heavy defeat that we sustained last year. I think a lot depends upon what your fundamental motivator was. So mine was always to be a member of Parliament, to be the Member of Parliament for North Dorset, and to serve and to represent North Dorset to the best of my ability. And that bit of the job continues, whether you're on the government benches or the opposition benches. Where I think there is a difference is how you interacted, if you were lucky enough to have been an MP before 2024, how you interacted with Labour when they were in opposition. And I'm originally from South Wales. My party, the Tory party, is not the party of first choice. And I've always worked on the maxim that, you treat people how you would like to be treated yourself. And politics is cyclical. Parties go up and parties go down and so on and so forth. So I've got some good friends, always had good friends in the Labour Party. in Parliament. We all get on well. So I find that when I've had to go and ask a minister a question on behalf of a constituent or raise an issue or, deposit a thought that somebody's given to me about how a policy could change or evolve, nobody has sort of said, "Oh, Simon, you were very rude to us when you were in government and we were in opposition. Be gone. We don't want to engage with you." There's an appetite to engage. And, I think that will continue to work for my constituents.
That's great. Before we started rolling, we obviously were having an interesting talk there about the role of the politician on local issues versus national issues. How do you get that balance, between those two responsibilities?
It's difficult because we live in an interconnected world of social media and email. Very often, the MP is the easiest person to get hold of, and it is hard not to get sucked into being a sort of superannuated councillor. Now, as I mentioned, I was a councillor for 14 years and loved it. And I knew what the council was responsible for, and I knew what Parliament was responsible for. But you get engaged with issues as and when you're required. So I'm dealing with, and this will, again, not be unique to North Dorset, but I'm dealing with about 3 or 4 development sites at the moment where the developer just hasn't made good on the landscaping, on the pavements, on the roads, on the drainage, etc. Have gone off to the next scheme. And it's then working with the council, working with the developer, living with residents who've spent a vast amount of money to buy these houses, to try and get it right as quickly as possible. Now, that's a local authority issue, but sometimes it's the convening power that a member of Parliament can have. I mean, I get so many constituents, as we all will, who've been told their call is important, or somebody will get back to you, or yes, we'll respond to your email in 5 days. And out of desperation, they come and see the MP, or they contact the MP and say, "Simon, can you help on this? We are fed up. We've hit our head against a brick wall for 6 or 7 months in some instances. Is there anything you can do to help?" And it's the "oh God" moment. Actually, sometimes I call it something a little bit more fruity, but as we're broadcasting, I better be careful. It's the "oh God" moment when that email or that letter arrives with the portcullis and the House of Commons address and the letters MP after your name, where the service provider has nowhere else to hide. Because they know that the MP can ask a question in Parliament, they can write to the minister, they can instigate a debate. I had to do so with regards to a housing association some years ago operating in North Dorset. They were not providing the service to a group of... so I had a group of constituents. So we tried our hardest. They weren't responding. I had an adjournment debate. It spurred a response. So yes, you can. It's how you use that convening power, that influencing power, to try to achieve good and change.
That's fantastic. Speaking of sort of solving issues and things, what do you think are some of the bigger issues facing your constituency and Dorset as a whole?
It's got... Where do you start? I mean, it's... I think rural Britain, and what could be more rural than North Dorset, has a number of challenges. It's the cost of delivering services in a far-flung, sparsely populated series of communities. It's the falling birth rate and the ageing population, which presents all sorts of challenges with regards to how public service is both funded and delivered. It's about trying to get sustainable rural communities where there is housing at all pricing points and different types of tenure, to try to arrest what has been a very pernicious issue of people effectively priced out of the area that they call home by people moving into the area, retirees, or people just relocating from elsewhere. So there's all of those issues. And then you have that perpetual chicken and egg thing about businesses will come and existing businesses will grow if there's a workforce. The workforce isn't there if there isn't the housing. Which one goes first? So it's to try and strike that balance. And that can be tricky, particularly on the housing development side, because 88% of North Dorset by surface area is not developed. It's either woodland, it's forest, it's farmland, it's just open. And that's what makes it hugely special and why we're all very privileged to call it home. But it's not preserved in some sort of architectural aspect. It evolves. Our villages need to grow sustainably in order to maintain the village school, the village shop, the post office, the pub. Otherwise, we'll see these things dwindle as populations shrink. So all of those are challenges.
North Dorset is such a big constituency, isn't it? We're talking from like Blandford all the way to Gillingham, all the way to Fordingbridge. It's a vast area.
It's about 440 square miles. Yeah, I reckon it's a good sort of 50-minute drive north, south, east, west.
An issue I've been paying attention to is the changes to day centres in that area. And this is policy across Dorset, but in North Dorset in particular, there are plans to close the Shaftesbury Plus Centre, relocate the Blandford one. Have you worked with the council on these proposals? Have you got a view on them?
I've certainly spoken to the senior councillors and officers about it, and I think we are starting to see a little bit of change in the thinking during the consultation process. I think they fired the starting gun on consultation far too early without really knowing precisely the baseline data of what the facilities provide. And again, I think it was inspired purely as a cost-saving exercise rather than thinking about how a rural area like North Dorset, and the same is as applicable to West Dorset as well, and lots of other rural areas, is that there are natural hubs and spokes. So Blandford is a natural hub with its surrounding villages, ditto Shaftesbury, ditto Sturminster Newton, the three which are under sort of question and review. And those surrounding villages look to those centres for all sorts of supports and services. Some sort of artificial impost coming from Dorchester, authored by people who've never been to North Dorset, is always going to be an artificial fabrication which doesn't work. And when you sit with parents, and we're talking here about parents who are in their sort of 50s and 60s, because we're talking about adult disabled or with special needs of some description or another. It gives them the respite time that they can go to a local day centre to allow that parent to go and attend to their own healthcare, do the shopping, tidy up the house, go and have their hair done, go to the dentist or whatever. But if you're asking people to go from Blandford to Sturminster and then back home again and then back to pick up and then, there's absolutely no time. And this is a point which has been made time and time again. And the community, working alongside local councillors, have risen magnificently to that communications challenge back to the council to say, we understand what you're doing. We don't think you understand why you're doing it. Number one, we don't believe that you understand the impact of what it is that you are proposing to do. In the name of all that's holy, press pause and rethink. Now, the consultation ends on the 9th of June. I hope that the council will listen. Otherwise, it will be a devastating impact on some of the most vulnerable people in our communities.
Absolutely. And well put as well. It's it'll be interesting to see how it works out. And it's worrying, I imagine, for some people. Talking more broadly now, more nationally, you've been quite outspoken on certain topics, especially around...
Never. Me? Outspoken? Good God.
Especially on President Trump of the US,
Yes, I don't think I'm on Donald's Christmas card list. I may be on one of his lists, but I don't think I'm on his Christmas card list. No. I think he's absolutely the worst excesses of populist politics. The divide and rule, the abuse of power and position, how he sort of demeans journalists, how he's hollowed out the senior military. I think he's a crook, frankly. I think he's deeply dangerous because there is a difference between... I think it's important to have an understanding of business in order to do politics. But you can't do politics like business. It's an entirely different set of disciplines. And I just think if you have somebody in the White House who is purely transactional, who is prepared to lie and misrepresent the truth, who has swallowed clearly hook, line and sinker the script of President Putin against the Ukrainian interest, I think he just sort of demeans not just his office and the White House, but demeans, in the broader sense of the term, the doing of politics.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, really. It's very devastating seeing some of the stuff happening in the US, and it's very disappointing. It's what people voted for, in a sense. It's unfortunate.
I think it does bring a question about the future of American democracy. That the leadership of both parties, had I been in the States last November, I would have voted for Harris in the same way that I would have voted for Biden. But the last few American elections, the electorate have been presented with a very narrow range of candidates, and I just think there's a big challenge for the doing of American politics as to how the so-called leader of the free world is going to be selected and elected.
Do you think any lessons from that are being heard in the UK, or the wrong lessons?
I think the challenge that we all have in the mature Western democracies is that our democratic way of life, our basic rules and freedoms, the rule of law, etc., have not for many, many decades come under challenge or indeed threat. If you look at the franchise, it's just got wider and deeper since, Disraeli in the 1868 Representation of the People Act, and arguably going back to the 1832 Great Reform Act. It hasn't come under threat. And I think we have all become lazy and flabby in actively defending what we think to be of value and importance, and being prepared to put our money where our mouth is. And I think that's proving to be a challenge in France, in Germany, in Spain, in Italy, in Portugal, across most of Western Europe, certainly in the States as well. And so, my hunch is that we have to try, and it's counterintuitive to do it, and it's difficult because you then get that absolute storm on social media, is that not everything is black and white, and not everything is easy. If it was, then, you listen to, say, Reform, for example, who makes the handling of the immigration issue sound as if it's as simple as putting milk on a bowl of cornflakes. It's not. And I keep saying to people, if only we'd thought of doing that, Politics is a difficult thing. In the 10 years I've served as an MP, if I've learned anything, and I've learned a heck of a lot, but if I've learned anything, it's that most politics is a shade of grey, not black and white. So how we face into it, it's an uncomfortable bit of political territory to be occupying at the moment, which is the sort of pragmatic centre ground, that everybody's trying their best, everybody has broadly the same destination, merely different routes to arrive at it, without denigrating the opposition all the time, belittling, having to win on every point, every time. That is the politics of the demagogue and the populist. It attracts people, and I can understand how it attracts people who feel disenfranchised or disaffected, or that the system isn't working for them. Somebody suddenly arrives and goes, trust me, it's frightfully easy. I can deliver it. All I need is your vote and those of your friends. And hey presto, we're all off. We're all off to paradise. It never works like that. So I think politically, as a political class or a political generation, if you will, I think we have got to grow a pair and find our spine and backbone again to make the weather. If we reflect on some of the great transformative prime ministers that we've had, you think about Lloyd George, you think about Attlee, you'd have to put Thatcher into the mix, and arguably you'd have to put Blair as well. They weren't all focus group, with the exception of Blair, they didn't really exist. There was no social media. They made an argument. They talked about why trade union control was important. They talked about why a welfare state was important. They talked about why the power of the Commons over the Lords was important. They made an argument. They advocated their beliefs, and they said to people, we need you to understand them. You don't all have to love me and agree with them, but you have to understand why I'm saying it and what I believe we can achieve by doing it. In this social media age, I'm afraid political cowardice seems to now be becoming the norm, of just saying the easy, of saying and steering away from the difficult or the contentious, and not trying to make the argument, as I say, make the weather to shape opinion. If politics was all about just repeating what you heard in the saloon bar of the Dog and Duck at 10:30 on a Friday night, everybody would be a politician. But it's not. And I think we've just got to try and remind ourselves of that and collectively have the bravery to speak up against and say these things are complicated and there are things which are broken or not working as well as they should, which are going to require radical re-engineering, not just easy tinkering and a bit of welding and a bit of sticking plaster or a bit of bubble gum, to patch the hole on the exhaust. Some things need to change and to change fundamentally.
Speaking of difficult and divisive issues, you wanted to talk about the Middle East as well. You've got your views on the conflict in Israel. And
yeah, I mean, I worry that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his supporters now deflect any critique or criticism or probing question of what it is that the government is doing as being anti-Semitic. And to wear the badge of anti-Semitism is an abhorrent badge to wear. But one should be able to, and candid friends who are allies and supporters should certainly have the opportunity to say to any government, any ally, we remain friends, but we think what you're doing in this respect is wrong. And I say this as a right-of-centre politician. I'm afraid the Israeli politics is now being controlled by a small but very powerful right-wing, nationalistic, Russian Eastern European emigre Israeli, not the sort of gentle cooperative kibbutzim movement that one would have thought of in the 60s, 70s, and throughout actually most of the 1980s. We need to have that two-state solution of respected borders between the two. My view is, and I'm not a lawyer of any description, certainly not an international lawyer, but I've got huge sympathy with those who would say that what the Israeli government is doing today is way and beyond what could be deemed to be a legitimate response to Hamas. And it also has the entirely, I won't say unforeseen consequence, because I think it's entirely foreseeable, of seeing Israel at the end of this process with fewer friends and those friends less robust in their friendship. And just at a time when moderate Palestinian opinion in Gaza and the West Bank were taking to the streets in protest of the rigidity of Hamas and the evil of Hamas and saying this is not us, in the same way that sort of Catholics would have taken to the street in Northern Ireland to say the IRA is not them at the height of the Troubles, etc. Just as they were doing that, Israel ramps up a gear, which makes that moderate Palestinian voice go, well, what's the point? We might as well just stick with what we got because we're going to be destroyed anyway. Now, how it ends, I do not know. I think probably the linchpin in all of this is America. I think luckily, and I thought it was quite interesting last week when Trump was in the Middle East and the Israeli government was begging him to visit Israel. And there was steadfast refusal from the White House so to do. That of itself speaks volumes. I just detect, and I think the far more informed commentariat in this area are starting to detect an irritation in Washington with regards to how Israel is prosecuting this war. And I think if America is making those sounds both externally and internally, that may provide a grain of hope. But this idea of what is ethnic cleansing, of removing Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank, of continuing to turn a blind eye to decades-old UN resolutions with regards to the occupied territories, that has got to stop.
It's fiendishly complicated and very dismaying, some of the scenes coming out of it.
It is, but if national politicians said, oh, it's fiendishly complicated or it's tricky, we'll put it at the bottom of the intro, we'd never solve anything. That is what being in politics is about. It's about analysing facts and data. It's about having a vision which is founded with some immutable principles on all sorts of issues, and then trying to carry those through. Politics should be difficult. If it was all just easy, it wouldn't be as satisfying as it can be. I think we all take pleasure when we have cracked a particularly difficult problem in our own domestic lives. That should be the case with the doing of government and being in Westminster as well.
I could listen to you talk about politics and international affairs for hours, I think. It's just absolutely fascinating stuff. I'm really enjoying it. But I know you've probably got a very busy day to get back to.
No, you could have me for the next week if you want.
You'll have to come back.
I'm Welsh by birth, so give us an open mic. We'll just keep going. I mean...
my last kind of question then, as you said, you've represented Dorset for the last 10 years. How do you think the county's kind of changed over that time? What changes have you seen?
A lot of it hasn't. And I say amen to that. North Dorset is, it is delivering some economic growth. It's delivering new housing, but the environment of North Dorset and the people of North Dorset has that wonderful sort of continuum that goes through it. Challenges emerge. Some of them are, and some of them are solvable. So back in 2015, my inbox was absolutely full of broadband issues. You very rarely now get a broadband issue because there was a huge focus on rural broadband delivery, and the rest, as they say, is history. So I think it's always to maintain. It's never to put on rose-tinted spectacles. It's always to get up in the morning and say, what is today's challenge going to be? And if one doesn't automatically present itself, you jolly well go out and find one and try and make it your own and try and make a difference. So my hope will always be that I want to see at the, whenever I decide, either I decide or my electorate decide it's time for me to, hang up my boots. I want to see, what I'd really like to see is some significant step changes in educational outcomes. We've got great schools in North Dorset. I've got 3 teenage girls at our local high school. They're doing brilliantly with first-class teachers and all the rest of it. But there is a tendency in rural Britain not to grasp all of the opportunities that education can provide and all of the keys that then equips you with to open all of life's doors going forward. And I think if we can sort of crack that would be a sign of delivery and progress.
Fantastic. My last question then, the one we ask all our guests. What does Dorset mean to you?
It means home. I'm not a Dorset man, originally from South Wales and selected by North Dorset Conservatives back in January 2015. We'd holidayed in Dorset. It has always given me, as I think it does everybody, the warmest of warm welcomes, both to me and to my family. And it has always felt as if we've been here for years, which is why I think people come to Dorset and never leave. And if we can maintain that through all of the, life's changes and ups and downs of life and the economy and so on and so forth. But I think the basic underpinning tenets, if you will, of what it is to be a North Dorset resident, I think that's all pretty timeless. And the people are great, and the businesses are entrepreneurial, and the farmers are hardworking. Our doctors are, working flat out. Our hospitals are busy. Everybody's doing their best. And what I like about North Dorset, and it's very different from, I think, a densely populated urban area, there is still a sense of what can we do to help ourselves? Not what can the council do or what can the government do to solve this or whatever. There is still that very strong community spirit of the village fetes and the Christmas bazaars and the, our favourite thing in our village. We've won a few times. We've come second. We're determined to win this year. It's the largest pumpkin competition, and this is something which my daughters and I take hugely seriously. It's those things. They're not unique to North Dorset, but they're very special. And I think it is a hallmark of the difference between living in rural Britain than it is in urban. And having lived in both, and obviously having worked or working in central London, the emotional relaxing that you feel usually when I've just pulled off the 303 onto the A350 and you know that you're not a million miles from that wonderful sign that says, "Welcome to Dorset," that's very special. And I think that will always continue.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time, Simon.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So that was the end of the episode. We really enjoyed having Simon on the podcast today, and I hope you enjoyed hearing him. I thought it was really interesting hearing how he's seen the county change over the last 10 years and his views on politics. Thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe the video if you're watching the video, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Many thanks.